Penguin Random House Audio presents Walk Softly on This Heart of Mine, a novel by Callie Collins, read for you by Eva Kaminsky and Michael Crouch. For Austin, Texas. Dust to dust, baby. The reputation for tolerance is what got a lot of people here. We had people showing up at the Armadillo that had heard this was a city of like-minded souls. They were getting whacked by rubber hoses at home, so they came here to simply find a more tolerant atmosphere. In some people's minds, tolerance is mistaken for something benign, but it's not. Eddie Wilson. He says, "Boy, what you gonna do with your heart in two?" Jason Molina. John Henry Split My Heart. We'd had the bar half as long as we'd been married, and so about 15 years when our regulars started to disappear. We weren't worried at first. Or, not too worried, really. The guy with the scar along his jawline and the silly Stetson who would bring all his girls, sit across from them and rub his hands together over the table like he was warming them over a fire. Didn't show up for weeks, but we assumed he must have moved away. Fewer parties, though, too. Not even our friends came around as often. It got so that between open and when the music started, only 2 or 3 people would wander in. They'd usually be alone or with a single friend, and they would sit with them all intimately, forehead to forehead, and their backs hunched on the round stools, interested only in each other. What I mean is that they could have been anywhere at all, in any room, in any town in the world. And they'd order beers or shots of Beam and drink them so slowly, Wendell could wash the glasses one by one in the back only every 30 minutes. Could even take his time with them, if he ever took his time with anything. And we'd never get backed up at all. And then one Friday night, we realized it had been a whole week since we'd had to make last call. Wendell would just walk through the white noise of the jukebox speakers when it felt late enough, kick away the brick, pull close the front door, and flip the deadbolt. All at once, our customers seemed to dissolve back into the woods around us, like a sink full of water slipping down a drain. Suddenly, it was just dry. And the music didn't start until late, usually. Until at least 9. The weekend sets didn't even bring out a crowd anymore. Daryl and his band had been playing Fridays and Saturdays as long as we could remember. But they hadn't seemed to write anything or even learn a tune that hadn't been in the set already in years, felt like. And if there was anyone still left in the room past the last jangly chord and downstrum of I Saw the Light, they'd swivel toward whoever was tending bar and signal gently. Just a little flick of a hand in the air for their tab. No one danced. The floors were clean of boot scuffs even. And I came out of the kitchen one night to find Wendell moving around the room like a weird sort of cowboy puppet. Janky, and as close as he gets to ashamed. Planting one foot and scraping his other toe in a long, loud path behind him, over and over again. It used to be that it didn't matter what we did, who we booked. The place would be full. So hot inside in the summers that we could feel the sweat coming off folks from 2 feet behind the bar. It'd soak right up into the air and settle back down on our skin, mingle with our own. By 8:30, Wendell and I would both look like we'd stepped directly out of a shower. We'd leave the back door wide open, and the side door too, and people would cluster around them, frenzied, burst out into the parking lot like herds of animals, trying to catch any kind of breeze. Ashtrays, always endless ashtrays to empty, full of the sooty remains of parliaments and skinny 100s. and the tables sticky with the yellow of cedar pollen when it was falling. In the winters, a different kind of heat. A big warmth. The bar glowing gold every night, like midnight mass on Christmas Eve and full of booze. And it did feel somehow religious, I thought. Full of a stranger, bigger kind of faith than the one I knew. When Wendell set up chairs, I sometimes even thought of them as pews. The pool table, a sort of altar, covered in its plastic tarp, and scattered chipped glasses and extra cables coiled tight like snakes. Sometimes even the guitars, together and wailing, sounded to me like they were praying. Where was everybody now? We'd asked each other. And what could we do? Even Wendell, who used to be so light and real easy in the eyes, would duck his whole tall body under the bar door and pop back up on the other side like he'd done some kind of magic, looked crushed. I felt a creeping kind of lonely I hadn't known in a long time. When I'd get in the car at the end of the night, the building looked dark as sin, like someone had boarded it up, and the air felt stifling. The big white neon star on the front of the bar shone like the moon, and the blank sky pushed down on us. Mean, and surely on purpose, I told Wendell, between the trees. We couldn't afford much more of the quiet in a strict financial sense either. We were paying higher bills on Rush Creek than we should have been, considering how far out of town it was. But the lot was big, and there was the house on the other side, and the foundations were cracking along with the limestone underneath them. The power could be finicky in the wrong weather, and if it got cold for more than a day or two in January, the heat would go out, and it'd just stay cold until we bugged the hell out of the city, until they sent a guy out to get down on his knees and rattle his hands around in the vents. So Wendell and I made a plan. I'd hold down the fort alone, pay Daryl only a portion of the tips for playing the same country covers every night, take his hard look all on my own, and Wendell would go out to scout for somebody new to play, someone who could bring people out again. It took months. Alone in the bar, I would get bored and wound up, angry even, at having ended up where I had. I'd fly into fantasies of crowds and sound while I wiped down the tables for the 7th time, the 8th. Crowds and sound were all I wanted. I was still here, sure, but wilted and wounded, back against the wall. And when Wendell would come home at the end of the night, he didn't much have it in him to talk. Would just slip off his jeans over his thick socks and sleep nearly silent. He'd come back with jack breath and slow feet and darker, lazy eyelids. But then, eventually, he came back with Doug. Do I wish I could go back in time and change what happened? Just pull the emergency brake and stop the whole goddamn thing before it had even started? Do I wish Wendell hadn't been at the Armadillo that night and seen Doug play and set all of our lives in motion again? I don't really know. I do know that a still life, a mind in too much quiet, can be a dangerous thing. And I have to live with the long echo of the choices I made. And maybe, mostly, the choices I didn't. But I don't see much value anymore in looking backward. Better some noise, right? In the end, than nothing at all.
1. We moved out to Rush Creek for the job. The house was just a bonus. I hadn't had a solid gig for months on end, and the offer Wendell made me the night I met him was almost too good to believe. I didn't even really expect anything from the house, the way he kind of glossed over it. But it was huge, old, and kind of out of place, like it had been lifted right off a farm in Carolina or somewhere in the deep South. A big front porch and the living room full of sun from the windows. It was crumbling some, sure, and the upstairs was just these dusty, cramped...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?